This is a little bit of a sort of like partially philosophical but mostly retrospective view of what I've been doing with my project. And this is a slide about sort of my motivation, and I think it comes partly in line with what Pavel was saying at the beginning about sort of a self-service digital asset thing, and I think also significantly in line with what Tone was saying about how blockchain only makes sense for things that don't exist. So when I think about what it means to deploy, to have blockchain interaction actually get to real people, I think about the brands that sort of people live their lives through. And if you think about it from a branding perspective, you think about the associations of the Bitcoin brand to regular people out there. It's got a lot of strong associations. Some of them are positive and some of them are not. And it's not something, for the most part, you don't see Coca-Cola wanting to be like tightly associated with it. It's a little bit of a risky brand. You start seeing, people started talking about blockchain largely for this reason. They wanted to have this sort of, brand for what they were doing that was not this sort of anarchist flavored Bitcoin. And I think blockchain has a couple problems. One is it's sort of not clear what it means, as we sort of discovered with the time chain conversation earlier. And another is that it's too much like the Bitcoin brand. It's too much about money. It's too much about, this sort of like financial confusion. And so I think that also doesn't really work. You're seeing Libra very recently. They're out there, they have their brand, but not only do they have their brand, they have the technical ability to deliver blockchain software, time chain-based software that can meet the needs of whatever their brand needs, right? So Facebook, when it deploys a currency, that currency will do what Facebook wants it to do. It will support Facebook's brand in the world. And that's what they need, and that's why they're doing it. For the most part, that's not the case for the most powerful organizations in the world. Including governments, including Boeing, right? Like major organizations with enormous, deep economic power do not have the ability necessarily to deploy these kinds of solutions in a way that comports with the way they already interact with their customer base, with their fan base, whatever it is. So my thesis for what I wanted to do, what sort of excites me in the world of blockchain, was to come up with something white label. And it's a lot like, I think, what Pavel was doing. It's different in some ways. But the thesis is that brands want to control their space. So when you go to a brand's environment, whether that's on an app or on the web or on even in a physical space, it's very important for brands to control their space, how it looks, how it feels, how you interact there, the pace of it, how much you can talk to other people who are also in that space. All of these things are tightly controlled by brands in the real world. It's very important. They want to set their own rules. So blockchain engineers come from the world of Bitcoin for the most part. And they think about the world in terms of, I have this asset, I have an unspent transaction output, I can spend that transaction output into a whole bunch of other unspent transaction outputs and they'll get confirmed in this way. It's a framing that is not really on point with the way a lot of major institutions want to think about their relationship with their people. So when they think about the rules of the brand, they're not thinking about how should transactions that transfer things be signed. How long will it take for something to be final? These are not the questions that drive decision making among the kinds of people that I'm imagining I want to build for. Third is just performance in a sort of computer sense. People are not looking for something that they can't rely on. They need, if they deploy a system that their name is on, they need it to perform. Because if it does not perform, then they will be seen as not performing, and it will be negative to them. So I want to build something that when I put something on it, when somebody uses my platform, they know that it will perform for them, that it's not going to fall over, and they're not going to be embarrassed by it. And there are a lot of platforms out there that have this promise, and people talk about all of them, and I'm not going to go through and list them, but people have mentioned them to me throughout the day. You all know what they are. I chose to build on the Cosmos network because I know Jay from a while back. My hedge fund that I was with at the time did their pre-fund, and I was already sort of involved with them, and I made that decision to proceed with development on that. And so what that meant is I had access to it, right? I could call up Jay and I could be like, let's get coffee, and I could ask him some question about Amino, and he would tell me, he would answer it, right? And even then, this whole process, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about, is how hard this process was, even with that, right? If you're Old Navy, you have no shot, none, to get a meaningfully customized experience out into the world using technologies of this sort at all. There's just no way to do it right now. And that's the thing that I wanted to address. So what I'm building is a programmable brand sandbox on top of the Cosmos SDK with a limited, but I hope meaningful set of primitives that allow you to do certain kinds of things, but a controlled enough set that I know it will perform, that I'm not going to allow people to shoot themselves in the foot. So, if there's something that you can't do, you can't do it, right? I think that kind of constraint is the kind of constraint that is workable for businesses. They are able to think about the constraints, do the thing they want to do within them, and they'll be happy that the thing works. In order to make this actually reach people, there is a native Android wallet that knows how to speak Amino to the SDK, to the backend, to the nodes. And then the native Android wallet can talk over Android inter-process communication to a Unity SDK. And then the Unity SDK is what your developers can use to build whatever your connection wants to be. So it's this sort of 4-part thing, including this example game that I've been developing. So what does it take? And this is, I think, this is sort of what I want to sort of show you guys. What does it take to take something from, a white paper, a GitHub repo for a blockchain SDK, and take it all the way to something you can download on the store and run smart contracts, and it's smooth and it's nice, and it just does the thing that, you want it to do, and you don't have to be excited about blockchain per se to want to use it. So, performance is very important. The tooling around the SDK just to build your backend is important. The documentation of your protocol is extremely important. You need to know how to deploy it. You need to know how you're going to do validation. You need to have some sense of what the developer community is, both of the SDK and above it. You need to be able to try to see through the marketing noise that the whole world is full of around what products are good, what products are bad, what products can do what, to what can actually be delivered, which is quite hard to figure out. And what I've found is you have to sort of get past this focus of development communities on the raw mechanics of the base layer. People are very concerned with the nature of the zero knowledge proofs that they use, which is cool, and I love it. But when you try to build a product, what I've found is that you often wind up bumping into these things, into these questions, in ways that make the product really difficult. You want to deliver a thing, and when you come at it from the perspective of, okay, but how do I make it work anyway? It's a little bit of a new song to a lot of these people. And I think it's something that we need to think about is how, to come to an approach of it's not about the math, it's not about the purity of your algorithm, it's about how do you make this work, right? And how do you approach developers on your platform in a way that, you want to support them in delivering something as your primary purpose. So I want to talk about Cosmos account creation using the Cosmos SDK. So the way you create an account inside the Cosmos SDK is you send some kind of asset to a wallet, to a Cosmos address, right? And the account keeper sees an incoming transaction to an address, it goes out, it looks at LevelDB, and if it doesn't have an address there, it creates one, right? Because now there's an incoming transaction. That's the only way to create an account in the Cosmos SDK. What that means is, if you want to create a self-service sign-up flow for a user, in the SDK as it currently exists, what you're supposed to do is have your user talk to another web server. That web server has a hot wallet containing some amount of some tokens that you have allocated for this purpose. That hot wallet then signs a transaction sending those tokens to the new account, and then either hands that transaction back to the client to publish to the nodes or publishes it to the nodes directly. As someone who's got a very small team building a product, that's a significant lift for me. I don't particularly, that's the difference in my perspective and in the perspective of the dev team of Cosmos itself is significant here. To them, running these nodes all the time, running these clients all the time, always doing all this stuff, it's not a big deal to spin up another instance that manages this flow. To me, deploying this stuff on Android to talk to my cluster, it actually is a significant thing. It's another piece of my infrastructure. I have to worry about its production availability. I have to worry about its hot wallet security. I have to worry about all this stuff, right? So I don't, and for what? I don't particularly want to do that. That's just totally ancillary to what I'm trying to do, which is get a new user on my system. So if you go in and you build an action called sign up, what you'll find is that when you go to execute this action, the SDK will reject your request, and it will say account does not exist. And this is a check that exists on any message signed by an account that doesn't exist, right? So there's built into the SDK, it's impossible to build a sign-up flow in the vanilla SDK at all, because no message can be signed by an account that has not yet received anything, right? So you either have to give some master key to every client and just find some way to make it not matter, which is possible, or you have to go into the SDK, open up the pre-authorization handler, find the code that makes this check, and change it, right? And basically have it not kick you out if you're doing a sign-up flow, whatever. But you're tinkering inside the SDK, right? Not ideal. What to me I think is sort of most illustrative about this is that there actually is a GitHub issue and has been for months, right? That was opened by another developer, not someone on my team, saying they wanted to do this. And the Cosmos team, there's so many issues, and they're doing an amazing job, and I think it's a really cool product. But it didn't really sort of it didn't really register with them that this was a problem. So I think it's important if you're out there building these products or want to build these problems to be aware that issues like this, right, that are very much this is another sort of piece of the disconnect between people who come out of finance and money and tokens, who think primarily about token transfer, thinking, why would you ever want an account that didn't have any tokens to be able to do anything? There's nothing to do if you don't have any tokens, right? That's a normal way to think if you come out of Bitcoin. That makes sense. If you don't come out of Bitcoin, if you come out of the Wall Street Journal, right, and you're saying, oh, okay, I want to give anyone who shows up 3 free articles. So that doesn't make sense, right? You want a user welcoming flow. This freemium model is all about someone can show up with no history, and you can give them some selection of things they can do, and there's some process by which you escalate how committed they are. And the ability to show up with no commitment and engage with some part of your platform is quite core to the way economics works in the web right now, in the normal web, right? I don't mean normal, but you know what I mean. And it's something that isn't part of the thought process right now in a lot of the sort of Bitcoin, Bitcoin-based community. So, next piece, message signing. Okay, so how does message signing work? There's a lot of ways message signing can work, but a traditional way to do message signing is you build your transaction message, you encode it in some way, so JSON is normal, but whatever, some encoding where based on your message you know exactly what, in text, right? In plain text, what is this message? And then you hash the message, you sign the hash, right? The signature of the hashed arranged message is the signature, and then when you receive the message on the other side, you look at the raw message, you do the same process on your side, you encode it, hash it, sign it, you compare the signatures, are they the same? If so, the message is validly signed. what happens if one piece of that is 1 bit off, right? Everything goes wrong. That's the nature of cryptography, right? That's the point of cryptography, is that there is no way to, there's no proximity measure, right? That's like central to what cryptography is that if something isn't quite right, it's as wrong as if it was completely wrong. So if, and as this is a case, with my dev team in Cosmos, if your Apache 2N library by default signs hashes messages before signing with Keccak 256, and the Cosmos SDK expects you to sign it with SHA 256, the only thing you'll know is that your messages don't pass. They don't pass. There's just nothing, right? And it's this kind of thing, in this sort of rubber meets the road thing, is very frustrating and very sort of like tricky to tease out. So we had to spend a bunch of time like drawing one step at a time, side by side, through different code bases to figure out, okay, when do things diverge? And this is sort of an artifact, of not, there's no test fixtures around like, here's a sample message, here is it encoded, here it is, here's its hash, here's its signature, right? That doesn't exist in the Cosmos code base. They have tests, but they're full round trip tests. They're saying, I take this message, I sign it, and then I go through the other side, it's the same message. Fine, as far as it goes, right? For talking to yourself, for building a network. But for engaging with the development community, it's easier if there's more really specific examples, really specific walkthroughs of how does your actual encoding work. Because, Cosmos, their documentation assumes you have access to the Go binaries for the backend at all times. So when you ask them, how am I supposed to send messages, they're saying, well, why don't you just pass the message to the Go client library, have it sign it for you, send it out. But if you're building a native Android wallet, you don't have access, you can't run Go code on the phone. So it's not an option. And there wasn't until last week another option. These are sort of illustrative of like what the things you run into are. Okay, here's another one. Amino versus protobuf. So I do know that protobuf has one F. They're almost the same. Amino is very much like protobuf. However, it has this extra concepts around typing, and it has these prefix bytes that, depending on the type, you prepend to your message, right? You prepend, if it's a public key, you prepend these 6 bytes to your encoded public key in order to convey the typing information. This is a public key. Okay, well, what's 6 bytes? It's not easy to find out, right? You can go looking. There is a table with some of this stuff, but not everyone that's even built in is there. Furthermore, if you define your own types inside the SDK, which of course is the point of using the SDK, Go generates prefix bytes in a way that's even partially based on sort of the Go's internal type representation. So if you change the name of the type in the Go code, the prefix bytes will change. So a clear, first of all, I think that's a choice that I think is reflective, okay, of your strategy and of your point of view around developers and development. And it's also something that if you do it, you should feel like, okay, I really need to be very clear about how I do my prefix bytes. And you can't get away from Amino. Even if you do HTTPS, you still need to Amino encode a lot of things. Okay, skipping the public key encoding, but it's... Okay, so what do we take away from this? Developers will want things that you don't think when you start building that they will want, right? That's good. That means you've done something interesting, right? That's what you want to have happen. Developers to want things you didn't expect. So be on top of it. Be, ready to be like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, let me empower you there. Cosmos is amazing. What I've been able to do with it is quite cool. I'm very excited about it. I don't mean to rag on them. It's just an illustration of like the kinds of things that pop up when you're working with it. Document a lot, and this is just like what it takes. This is what it is, building in crypto, as I'm sure a lot of you know. Okay, thank you very much.
Round of applause. That was very good. It was very hands-on and technical and beautiful. So obviously we're running a little late, but let's do a question for this masterpiece. Any questions?
When can we expect your product to be
There you go.
publicly available?
Publicly available. I don't know. I mean, the public. First of all, there's gradations of publicly available. I would like.
Available.
I would like to have it BIP available. Come talk to me. Let's talk about what you want. I will try to figure out a timeline that helps deliver. I really want to work with people who want to use this thing. I'm hoping to have my demo in around 3 months. So I hope that I will have a game on the Android App Store in 3 months. That feels aggressive to me. I feel more conservative as 6 months game on the Android App Store. These are my goals. I'd love to have something more generally workable in a year, but I really don't. I haven't done the kind of project planning that would let me say that to you as like a product manager, like I know this. But that's just sort of an instinctual thing. But if you're interested, come talk to me. Let's talk about your thing, and I'll work on getting your primitives in earlier and getting you as a beta partner.
Michael, that was great. Another big round. Thank you.